minutes. And I
All right, we have quorum, it's
just
time, so we will call ourselves to order for our July 7th meeting. First up, we have approval of our agenda for the day. Are there any corrections or other things needed on our agenda? All right, then we'll go on to approval of our minutes from June 2nd. That we will take a motion for.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. We have a motion from Monica. Is there a second?
I'll second even though I wasn't there.
Don't think
Can
you
I do that? No.
I will second.
We have a second for Bob. Thank you. All right. Are there any corrections to our minutes?
I have a correction.
Yes.
I was not present.
Oh, so just a correction to members present.
Correct.
Okay, so members present June 2nd was not Jeremy.
Correct.
Actually, I have a question about that. I should have been excused because I know I notified Emmett and Sandy.
These are new forms, so I apologize. Yeah,
Okay.
because is there that option in here?
It says an E.
On the legend, it has an E equals excused. So apparently that's an option.
E for excellent and
We've never
excused.
noted that before, but
I'll excuse Jeremy too, because he let me know too.
okay. So apparently we
This
have
time
an
only.
excused option for
We're
Jeremy.
on
Bring
and
my kids
Cecily.
next time.
Okay.
Okay,
We would welcome that.
yeah.
Oh,
Maybe
boy.
his famous last word.
Any other corrections to minutes? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving those minutes with adjustment to members present, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those minutes are approved then. Okay, this brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting where interested persons can address the commission on subjects not on our agenda. We've asked for pre-registration just to know you're coming. Has anybody pre-registered?
Nobody is pre-registered today.
Okay, we don't have any of those today. And as a reminder also, since we are in person, we are now taking those in person as well. So if there's anyone watching online wondering what's going on, our public invitation portion is come physically to a meeting as well, opposed to what we were doing before. So moving on to our business items then, our first one is the Lake Independence, Lake Minnetonka LRT, Minnesota River Bluffs LRT, North Cedar Lake, and Cedar Lake LRT Regional Trail Master Plans being taken together as they share some stuff for Three Rivers Park District, part 2 of what we had last month rather. We have Chee and Kevin, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, just a question.
Yes,
Are we online? I mean, are we on video?
we are on video. I believe it is recorded, not live streamed.
It is live streamed.
Oh, it is?
It's on our YouTube channel and
Okay.
and it is recorded too.
Oh, it's
So-
both.
So
Yeah.
are we going to be able to then attend by
We don't currently have that ability because of some wonkiness in the open meeting law and other stuff with that, that was waived during the emergency order. There were some bills proposed to change some of that, but they didn't move anywhere this session. So,
Thank you.
back that. Great, go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, Chair, Commissioners, and Council Member. My name is Chee, and I'm a planner at the Council. With me is Kevin, our Parks intern, who co-developed today's business item and presentation. We're here to present Part 2 of the 9 Regional Trails Plan on behalf of Three Rivers Park District. Last month, our colleague, Colin Kelly, presented Part 1, which included 4 of the 9 regional trails, which were the Loose Line, Madison Lake, Shingle Creek, and Northeast Diagonal Regional Trails. Today, Kevin and I are presenting the remaining 5 regional trails, the Lake Independence, the Lake Minnetonka, Minnesota River Bluffs, Cedar Lake, and North Cedar Lake regional trails. The Park District submitted 1 plan document for 9 existing regional trails that currently do not have a master plan. Some of the plan content is shared across all regional trails, while other content is distinct and specific to each trail. I want to note that some of the materials today will be similar or a repeat of from the previous presentation. However, I intend to highlight the differences. Before I start, I want to welcome Kelly Crispin from the Park District and Colin Kelly from the Council, who are both here to help respond to questions at the end. The 5 existing regional trails that are the focus of today's business item are located in the center and western part of the Metropolitan region. In Hennepin County, they're located in the west and southeast region of the county. These are figures 1 and 2 from the business item. Now I'm going to zoom in closer to each regional trail. The map on the left is the existing Lake Independence Regional Trail, figure 3 from the business item. It is a 17.3 paved trail running primarily north to south. It runs through the cities of Corcoran, Medina, Loretto, and Orono. The map to the right is the existing Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail, figure 4 from the business item. It is a 16.1 mile regional trail running from the southwest to the northeast. This trail is predominantly an aggregate trail. It offers scenic views of the Lake Minnetonka and passes through the cities of Victoria, Shorewood, Tonka Bay, Greenwood, Deep Haven, Minnetonka, and Hopkins. The regional trail is primarily owned and operated by the Park District, except for a 0.1 mile segment at its western terminus, which is owned by Carver County, but operated by the Park District, and the 0.4 mile cycle track segment along 8th Avenue, known as the Artery, which is owned and operated by the City of Hopkins. The next is the map on the left, figure 5 from the business item, shows the existing Minnesota River Bluffs LRT Regional Trail. It is a 10.1 mile trail following an old railroad route from Hopkins through Minnetonka and Eden Prairie to the Hennepin-Carver County border and through Chanhassen and Chaska. The plan focuses on only the portion of the regional trail within Hennepin County. Like Lake Minnetonka Regional Trail, this trail is also predominantly aggregate. Portions of this trail between the Hopkins Depot and 16th Ave South in Hopkins are undergoing significant changes as part of the Southwest Light Rail Transit Project, also known as the Metro Green Line Extension. Next is the existing Cedar Lake LRT Regional Trail. The map to the right is figure 6 from the business item. It is a 3.9 mile paved trail following the former railroad corridor of the Great Northern Railway from the cities of Hopkins, St. Louis Park, and Minneapolis. The entire Lake Regional Trail will be realigned and reconstructed as part of the Southwest Light Rail Transit Construction Project. The last trail is the existing North Cedar Lake Regional Trail. The map is figure 7 from the business item. It is a 4.2 mile paved trail running on a former railroad corridor from Hopkins Depot to the Cedar Lake Regional Trail in Minneapolis. The western portion between the Hopkins Depot and east side of TH 100 are owned and operated by the Park District. The remaining 1.8 mile with connections to Minneapolis are owned and operated by the Minneapolis Park and Board Recreation Board. This plan includes only portions owned by the Park District. Moving on to partner engagement. The engagement efforts were conducted differently as these 5 regional trails are generally already built and open to the public. The Park District described its partner and public engagement efforts as taking place in 4 different phases. Phase 1 focused on working closely with local cities and partner agencies to better understand the performance of the existing regional trails in their communities. Phase 2 focused on engaging members of the public, underrepresented community members, and existing regional trail users. Phase 3, the Park District re-engaged with partners and focused on obtaining additional feedback and keeping them informed of all decisions, including how their feedback was considered during the process. Phase 4 focused on obtaining feedback from both community members and partners, like the previous phase, keeping them informed of decisions and how their feedback was considered during the process. The cities involved in this engagement includes Chanhassen, Corcoran, Deep Haven, Eden Prairie, Excelsior, Greenwood, Hopkins, Loretto, Medina, Minneapolis, Minnetonka, Orono, St. Louis Park, Sherwood, Tonka Bay, and Victoria. The agencies involved included the Minnesota Department of Transportation and Department of Natural Resources, Carver County, and Hennepin County. The general themes from the partner engagement included adding more local connections, trailheads, site amenities, and wayfinding. The goals of public engagement were to engage all interested parties and affected parties, make engagement easy, interactive, thoughtful, and valuable, focus engagement on improving the safety, comfort, and use of the regional trail for all users, especially new users and groups that are currently underrepresented. Develop and expand relationships and partnerships with local communities, affected public agencies, and underrepresented communities. Lastly, mitigate existing racial, ethnic, cultural, or linguistic barriers and include people of diverse ages, races, ethnicities, incomes, national origins, and abilities. Public engagement most relevant to the 5 existing regional trails included a wiki map and several events in local communities such as the Night to Unite in Corcoran, community picnic in Maple Plain, Tour to Tonka in Minnetonka, and AARP senior bike ride in Hawkins. In total, there were about 122 participants engaged with these events. The feedback received from the public engagement activities were included in the trail plans. Improvements included trail realignment, reconstruction, and paving, enhanced wayfinding, adding trail amenities such as benches, trash receptacles, bike repair stations, and water fountains where feasible. In phase 2 of the engagement process, it included targeted engagement of underrepresented community engagements, or members. Underrepresented community members or groups are defined as those who are not using the regional trails to the extent which is expected given their percentage of the overall population within the regional trail service area, and those who are historically left out of park and trail planning processes. Engagement process focused primarily on building awareness, understanding barriers, identifying infrastructure improvements that help create a more inviting and comfortable user experience. Many improvements included in the trail plans reflect the needs and values of the underrepresented community members, including improvements related to the Americans with Disability Act, also known as the ADA, trail surface maintenance and reconstruction, pedestrian bridge improvements, and providing additional rest stops and wayfinding. The Park District remains open to additional recommendations to better integrate the regional trails directly into the communities they are intended to serve, which includes improving safety and providing more direct routes where possible, better connections with nature, parks, and destinations, developing more operational programming solutions to increase awareness, comfort, and ability, and remove barriers such as lack of equipment. The Park District is committed to be inclusive and responsive to changing needs and priorities. Now I'm going to start to move into the development concept of for each regional trail. Before I start, I would like to remind you that this portion of the business item does go beyond the typical requirements for this section to highlight other areas in which these trail corridors differ from one another. I'll be sharing information related to demand forecasts, demographics, trail improvements, and I will briefly touch base on acquisition. Additionally, these trails are generally already built and open to the public. The first regional trail is the 17.3-mile Lake Independence Regional Trail. Currently, about 95,000 people visit this trail annually. By 2040, this number is estimated to grow to about 114,000. The map on the right is figure 8 from the business item, illustrating the trail service area for this regional trail. The primary use of this trail is from The Lake Independence Regional Trail is on target for all monitored demographic categories. The only underrepresented group is people from households with an annual income less than $50,000. The proposed improvements for this trail includes widening and aligning portions of the trail, parking lot improvements, reconstruction of bridge deck, installation of rectangular rapid flash beacon, relocation of site features such as signs, retaining walls, and fences, improve ADA crossings and clear zones, and enhancing wayfinding and other signs. The construction of the new trail in Boardwalk is part of the 2-mile search corridor at the south end of the Lake Independence Regional Trail. It extends from its current terminus at the Loose Line State Trail to Nuremberg Memorial Garden Special Recreation Feature, and then to the Dakota Rail Regional Trail. Once built, it will increase the total trail mileage to 19.3 miles. Completion of this proposed extension would increase north-south options and create desirable loop opportunities. For the purpose of this plan, the proposed search corridor alignment is only a placeholder to recognize potential costs associated with this proposed extension. The Park District recognizes that additional analysis and partner and public engagement is required to ensure the route and trail design minimizes potential impacts to private property and natural resources and best meets the overall community needs. Acquisition cost is around $326,450, which consists mainly of limited use permits and easements. The next regional trail is the Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail, which is 16.1 miles long. The current annual visit is about 640,000, and it is expected to grow to 783,000 by 2040. The map to the right is figure 9 from the business item illustrating the surface area. As stated earlier, the regional trail is primarily owned and operated by the Park District, except for a 0.1 mile segment at its western terminus, which is owned by Carver County and operated by the Park District. The artery along 8th Avenue is owned and operated by the City of Hawkins. The long-term plan is for Carver County to own and operate the portion of the regional trail within Carver County, and for Hopkins to continue ownership and operation of the artery. This regional trail is primarily for recreational use, however, it has one of the higher percentages of transportation-related visits, around 30%. The underrepresented groups for this regional trail include people under 35 years old or over 75 years old, Black adults, and people from households with an annual income of $75,000 or less. Proposed trail improvements include upgrading portions of the trail from aggregate to pavement, development of a new trailhead and small parking lot, installation of grade-separated crossings, installation of site amenities and features, improves trail sightlines, ADA crossings, and trail crossing realignments, enhance wayfinding and other signs, and repair erosion and drainage where needed. Acquisition cost is roughly $805,000, with the majority being fee title. The third trail is the 10.1 mile Minnesota River Bluffs LRT Regional Trail. About 300,000 people currently visit the trail annually, and it is expected to increase to 374,000 by 2040. The map on the right is figure 10 from the business item illustrating the trail surface area. As mentioned, the Minnesota River Bluffs Regional Trail is part of the Southwest Light Rail Transit Development, where several bridges and underpasses and connections to the light rail stations will be developed. Additionally, the regional trail along the light rail will be relocated and paved within the existing corridor. The primary function of the regional trail is recreation. Underrepresented groups includes people under 18, people ages between 25 to 34, or over 75 years old, Black and Hispanic adults, and people from households with an annual income of $75,000 or less. Improvements include development of a small parking lot, improved ADA crossings, installation of site amenities and features, and enhancing wayfinding. Acquisition cost is about $24,000, which consists of limited use permits and easements. Now I'll turn it over to Kevin to present the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Chee. The fourth trail that is being presented tonight is the Cedar Lake LRT Regional Trail. The map on the right is figure 11 in the business item, which illustrates the trail service area for Cedar Lake LRT Regional Trail. This 3.9 mile trail runs along the former rail corridor through the cities of Hopkins, St. Louis Park, and Minneapolis, with updated termini at Hopkins Depot and Kenilworth Regional Trail. It should also be noted that the Cedar Lake LRT Regional Trail currently sits on property owned by the Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority. However, due to the construction of the Metro Green Line extension, the Rail Authority has transferred the property rights to the Metropolitan Council. After the light rail construction is completed, the land will be conveyed back to the Rail Authority, with the possibility of the property being transferred to the Park District at no additional cost. The construction of the Metro Green Line extension will also mean that the entire trail will be realigned as a part of the light rail transit project. Currently, this trail sees approximately 584,000 annual visits, and by 2040, this number is expected to grow to 673,000 annual visits. The primary use of this regional trail is recreational. However, 34% of visits have a transportation-related purpose. The Cedar Lake Trail currently has some demographic groups that are underrepresented. These groups are people under the age of 35 years old or over 75 years old, Black adults, Hispanic adults, females, and people from households with an annual income of $50,000 or less. The Cedar Lake Trail also has some proposed improvements, and these These improvements are to modify bike crossings, relocate a signal box, install a bike repair station, and to upgrade wayfinding. And the last trail that is being presented tonight is the North Cedar Lake Regional Trail. And as mentioned previously, this is only a portion of the trail, as the other 1.8 miles of the North Cedar Lake Regional Trail are owned and operated by the Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board. This regional trail runs along an independent rail corridor through the cities of Hopkins and St. Louis Park. The map on the right shows the North Cedar Lake Regional Trail and its service area. This is listed as figure 12 in the business item. Currently, the estimated visitorship for the North Cedar Lake Regional Trail is approximately 493,000 annual visits. And by 2040, this number is expected to grow to about 586,000 annual visits. The primary intended use for this regional trail is recreation, but like the Cedar Lake LRT Regional Trail, 42% of its visitors utilize the trail for transportation purposes. Underrepresented groups for this trail include people under the age of 35 years old or over 75 years old, females, Black adults, Hispanic adults, and people from households with an annual income of less than $50,000 a year. Several proposed trail improvements include realignment of the trail, a widening of the trail from 10 feet to 12 feet, the installation of benches, and to improve ADA crossings. The acquisition costs for this trail are about $123,944, and this is primarily through limited use permits. So the overall cost for the 5 regional trails in this plan is $15,368,000. And when we kind of subdivide these costs, the total estimated acquisition and improvement cost for the Lake Independence, Lake Minnetonka, Minnesota River Bluffs, Cedar Lake, and North Cedar Lake Regional Trail is $15,093,000. And in addition to the acquisition costs, there are also a total estimated operation and maintenance cost of $275,000. The rationale for the proposed actions in this presentation tonight is the Lake Independence, Lake Minnetonka, Minnesota River Bluffs, Cedar Lake, and North Cedar Lake Regional Trail master plans are consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, or specifically to Planning Strategy 1. In addition to the Parks Policy Plan, it is also consistent with other council policies. So the proposed actions for tonight is to approve the Three Rivers Park District's Lake Independence, Lake Minnetonka LRT, Minnesota River Bluffs LRT, Cedar Lake LRT, and North Cedar Lake Regional Trail Master Plans, and to advise Three Rivers Park District to implement advisory comments for the Lake Independence Regional Trail and Cedar Lake LRT Regional Trail Master Plans. And lastly, to require Three Rivers Park District, prior to initiating any construction or other projects, to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager. And that is it, and I would like to open up for questions, and I would also like to remind the commission and councilors that Colin Kelly from the council and Kelly Grisman from Three Rivers is here to answer any additional questions.
All right, thank you. What questions do commissioners have? Yes, Cecily.
Sure, I always have questions. Well, Kevin and Chee, thank you for the great report. I think these sound like very good changes in the proposed action, but I just have a couple of questions. One is about the trail demographic tables that are throughout the presentation. Gosh, you know, that column of overrepresented, that feels kind of awkward. Although I'm in the underrepresented column for most things. Do we have a breakdown of hikers, bikers versus rollers?
The plan didn't specifically lay out any number associated with each type of recreation. But I'm not sure if Kelly has any additional comments regarding that, since they are the ones that compile the data.
Thank you, Chee. Commission members, Chair, thank you for having me. Three Rivers does a robust regional trail park or regional trail visitor survey every 5 years. So we do have that data broken down for each trail as well as system-wide. I don't have that readily available.
But in general, what would you say for your regional trails?
I would say in general, about 80% are bikers,
Really?
and the rest is people walking, biking, running. Less than 1% are people inline skating or using scooters.
Interesting, because, well, I live in Washington County, so I'm not within the Three Rivers area, although I, use some of the trails and parks. And I've had people anecdotally tell me that there are an awful lot of walkers. They may not go as far. They may go out and back or come in at one trailhead and go do something else and come back. That's interesting.
Yep.
I think I had another question. Where did I put it?
Chair, while Cicely's reading, can I ask her a question?
Sure.
What's a rover? Is that?
Roll.
Roller.
Oh, roller, so excuse me,
I
I
don't know if
thought you
there's
said
a better
rover.
terminology, but I work for a couple cities in California, and we say,
Rollers.
with safe routes to school, it's hike, bike, and roll. I don't know. Is that a good terminology?
Yeah, I would,
Cover like-
I would consider myself a roller.
Roller? Okay. Like a rock and roller, yeah, there we go. My other question was, with Three Rivers, on page 15 in the conflicts paragraph, Park District encourages users to respect each other through a Share the Trail safety campaign. So who has right of way? Is it cyclists or hikers or rollers? Or is everybody just sort of asked to share?
Everybody's asked to share, but there are some etiquette things that we expect our users and encourage our users to do. So our trails are multi-use, right? So biking, walking, rolling, like we just talked about. But also there are two different directions. So people that are heading eastbound or northbound are to the right, and then vice versa, right on the left. So when you are walking or rolling, you are expected to stay to the right. And if you are traveling at a higher rate of speed, you are expected to announce your presence by saying on your left and then cautiously and slowly passing them to not startle them and to make sure that everybody has enough space to share that 10-foot corridor.
Thank you.
Jeremy?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to express my appreciation for using specificity in your level of public participation on page 14, specifying that you were acting in the consult level according to IAP2. It's really nice to see that clearly defined in advance so that those expectations are set. So I do really appreciate that. My question that I have for you is about the additional recommendations in the plan for continuous feedback. Do you have a public engagement tool established to collect those responses from the community, such as a map where they could tag locations where they have concern? Or is this just a mail it in when you have it sort of hope?
It's kind of both. So again, every 5 years we do this survey, and that survey includes a great opportunity for trail users to specifically say what's working or not working. We also do a general population survey, so if we don't happen to connect with you in one of our parks or on one of our trails, you might get a phone call taking a very similar survey where you can provide feedback as well. Then we do have a Three Rivers feedback email, so you can quickly kind of jot down, hey, this happened or that didn't work, or I'm not in favor of that. And we have a staff member dedicated solely to the regional trail, the operation of the regional trail system. So we have a couple different tools in place. But generally, phone call or email is the quickest way to let us know something's not working well and needs to be addressed.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked was I had seen, I think it was the city of Roseville was doing a public engagement piece where they utilized, it was for the Rosedale, they did a replan for that area. And they were using a map to collect geotagged comments from citizens or other interested parties to associate the spatial data of their concern with their specific concern. And that, I found that to be very helpful in putting context of issues in place.
Yep.
And I think that might be helpful for something like this, where you have an extended, I mean, I love that this was an omnibus sort of review of all the trails, and that might be a neat tool to connect citizens in the moment. They could snap a photo with their phone perhaps and tag the park district to provide that feedback about a safety issue, perhaps about a bad corner or something like that.
We use that technology when we're doing planning, and we have actually an internal beta product that we worked with a grad student to do exactly that. We
Okay.
just are not at a point of kind of fine tuning it and rolling it out.
That's great.
I would say that just the cautionary thing is when you ask for feedback, you get a lot of feedback and you need to be prepared to then respond very timely. So there's a lot of conversations we still have to have at our agency level of like, how do you actually manage that information and prioritize?
Great,
But I think that's the direction we'll eventually.
thank you.
I appreciate that feedback.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Bob.
Kelly? First of all, I think this is a really nice presentation. I enjoy the fact of looking at multiple trails at one time, because obviously you guys are thinking of the bigger picture. And it's easier for us, I think, at least to see what you were doing overall and kind of think about collectively. I like that. This is kind of a maintenance and operation issue as opposed to the overall plan, but I'll say it because it kind of comes to mind. One of the challenges I'm sure you all face is keeping the hedges, or not hedges, but the weeds and the trees and so forth trimmed near intersections. And I would just say, based on some experience, I think that's kind of an ongoing thing that I've seen that could be dangerous if it, either as a rider or when I'm coming up to the intersection that I know will contain riders and walkers and not being able to see very well. So I hope that in your planning that's emphasized.
That is something that we have crews that every year, multiple times a year go and they do all the vegetation clearing and they look specifically at those sightlines at intersections. And I think I can speak to all of the agencies that what we're finding with climate change and things getting warmer and wetter and the warm seasons extending further into the spring and later into the fall, that we have to dedicate more resources to that same level of maintenance and care of taking care of the vegetation that we ever had before. And I think it's only going to get more as we continue on.
One last question. Given the delay of the light rail completion and the dependence on your master plan on the ultimate alignment of the light rail program, is the delay in construction going to really change the alignment issues for you? Help me understand that.
The delay of construction does not affect the ultimate agreed upon alignment or final product, but it does delay in how quickly we are able to open the trail back up to service to regional trail users. So we've been pushing and working hard with the branch of the Met Council that monitors that and slowly opening small segments that have a logical connection on both the east and west side so that community members can at least start using some of those trail portions that are complete. And it's been, I think, very well received. And those changes or those openings have just started this summer. And with the long-term delays and setbacks, that's something Three Rivers is going to continue to monitor and push kind of hard on the Met Council to be thoughtful on how can we coexist in an active construction corridor so that trail users aren't impacted any further than they already are.
Yeah, I think that's important. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Anyone else? Yes, Todd.
So I've got a couple of questions here, and I'll follow along with, in no particular order except where I folded my pages. So on page 7, there's the trail that gets very close to Minnetonka Lake Minnetonka.
Are you on the staff report?
Yes,
the,
he's looking at figure
Okay.
4, one of the maps, the map of the
Figure.
Lake Minnetonka LRT.
Right. Figure 4, if that helps. But the trail trail seems to be getting very close, if not part of the shoreline. Right there.
Yeah.
On the right-hand side. I need to use a pointer. Is any of that trail that gets close to the, well, for my first question is any of that waterfront trail? And secondly, while you ponder that, does any of that waterfront trail have any access to the lake itself?
David, yes.
No, we're immediately adjacent to the lake for sections, a safe distance with buffers, right? You use caution, and then we do have an access point in deep haven
It's an overlook.
and overlook.
It's an overlook. It's not a shoreline access for shoreline.
The only reason I'm focusing on, thank you. The only reason I'm focusing on that is I was part of the Veterans Island. That's not the proper name for it.
Oh, on Big Island, the Veterans Camp?
Thank you. I was part of that committee, and I know there's to get to that, especially for us that need mobility, have help. Boy, it's been 3 years, so my vocabulary. So apologize for my fumbling around. I'm still not used to talking live. I digress. So there's on a personal note, there's a desire to see if there's a secondary way to get into Lake Minnetonka and get over there. And that's why I posed the question on that particular trail. Okay, I'd like to piggyback off the light rail question that Bob had. So part of the process is it's light rail property, then it gets transferred over to, an entity, and then when it's done, it goes back to light rail. Did I get that progression kind of right?
It was originally, well, in the most recent history, owned by Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority. And through the light rail process and the agreements between Hennepin County and the Met Council, the corridor was turned over to the Met Council so that they could actively manage the construction and let all of those construction contracts and really have control of the corridor. And at the end of the project, there is, the construction plans show essentially outlets along the whole corridor that are intended to be conveyed back to either Hennepin County or to Three Rivers. And if that would be for the trail component only, not any of the LRT aspects.
So I asked you that to ask you this. Does the maintenance responsibility, who does that go to after the back and forth part of everything?
Three Rivers would be responsible to maintain the trail surface and whatever land is ultimately conveyed to Three Rivers. But that would not be those stations or the tracks or the land immediately adjacent to the tracks that they need to keep clear zones and safety and maintenance access.
I think the important part on there for myself is the fact that Three River Stadium, they're stellar in their operations of their trails, and so I'm glad to hear that that's who will be taking the lead on that. Okay, moving on, if not all, at least a good portion, improving ADA crossings. What does that mean?
There are, and you probably are the expert on this, but across the whole regional trail system and sidewalks, where a sidewalk hits a road, the curb ramps are not ADA compliant,
Okay.
so either the truncated domes are too short, they're non-existent, they're not the right type. And
Sure.
really for a regional trail, those truncated domes should be the same length, and the curb cut should be the same length as the trail width.
Right.
And we have trails that predate that guideline, so we are slowly, every time we're doing a construction project, taking care of those.
And you're following your transition plan. And I'm glad to hear that because, but I wanted to hear what the list of ADA improvements
That's
are.
the biggest thing.
Very good. And then I'm sorry, let me rifle through my stuff here. Okay, here we go. The letter, the attachment letter from Eden Prairie. The add a ramp on the south side of Valley View from our trail to the bridge. Is that an ADA ramp or is that a boat ramp? What does that mean?
I believe that in that particular instance, it's like a pedestrian bicyclist ramp
Okay.
access point, and so they would be obligated or required
Sure.
to build it to ADA standards.
I just needed clarification on that. And to that end, thank you. I appreciate the presentation also, and thank you for your answering of my questions. Back to you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Todd. Anyone else? I was wondering, we have portions of these trails that are paved and portions that are aggregate, and plans for mostly the same, but I think possibly some changes. So I was just wondering, how are you deciding which should be paved and which should be aggregate going forward? And in particular, how that relates to the underserved communities and whether there's going to be expected to be any changes as a result of that.
Chair, there's 2 aggregate trails that are part of the trails that we discussed today. And the portions that are proposed for pavement are generally in more urban, I mean, not urban like Minneapolis or St. Paul, but urban small lake communities, or Hopkins, where there is a greater percentage of use and a greater percentage of people, I think, walking and running compared to the other quarters where there's more biking. And those decisions were also made in consultation with the local community to make sure whatever we were proposing or included matched their expectations. So like Excelsior and Greenwood wanted to see that change, where the other communities and their community members were a little bit more indifferent in that there's a lot of trail runners that prefer the softer, I mean, whether it's softer or not, I guess depends on your opinion, but the aggregate is more comfortable for their bodies to run on, especially their knees compared to pavement. So for every one community member we found that said, please pave it, we had one community member that said, please leave it as is, because we appreciate the diversity of opportunity within the greater system. So if we are looking for a paved trail, there are lots of other places we can go. We would like you to keep some of these, at least at this point, aggregate. So we have a place that we can go and do that and do it comfortably on our bodies. So we wrote the master plan to acknowledge that that's where we are at today and that's where the communities and the community members are at. But in the future, when and if those changes, we would be prepared to entertain those conversations and move forward accordingly.
Okay. Todd, yes.
Thank you, Chair. So that reminded me, I wanted to ask about the aggregate park trail. And basically it boils down to this. Are any of those aggregate trails paved, aggregate, and then paved again?
There are going to be a couple spots like that where you all of a sudden get to an underpass. We pave kind of leading up and out of that underpass. So
Okay.
you do have that throughout those corridors.
So 2 things. One question, the first question would be, is there an alternative hardened trail that for somebody with mobility issues would be able to utilize without having to deal with an aggregate surface?
Right now, the only thing that's proposed is what's already in place, which is the hard path limestone. Like
Right.
it's not big gravel. I don't know what class it is, but it's smaller fines.
I got you. So this leads me to my second point and/or question. Are the planners, I hate using the word are the planners aware of the responsibilities of making sure that an aggregate surface needs to be closely monitored for ADA. And part two of that would be, there are aggregate surfaces that have a lacquer, for the lack of a better description.
It binds all of the fines together.
Right,
Yep.
and I don't know if you've considered, if that's part of the planning process.
We have not addressed that at this master planning level. And I don't know if our maintenance staff is used those on those corridors. I do know that we have a couple spots where the trail is softer than we would like it, and maybe it collects water. And we've been working with Hennepin County, who owns those corridors,
Sure.
as well as the local communities, to adjust some culverts and some drainage issues that are creating the problems on the trail, so that hopefully we have that whole entire corridor back up and running to where it should be, so that all users can easily access and enjoy the corridors.
So there, as an ADA coordinator for the organization that I'm with, and I'm sure you have your own ADA, if you are wanting further input on just what we're talking about, I'd be more than happy, without charging you a consulting fee or anything, to have a
You've offered several times, and we absolutely should have you out and look at different projects.
Excellent.
And see if it works.
So
I think we can make that happen.
that's, I live, eat, and breathe that sort of thing.
I'm glad that you do. We need more people just advocating for that.
So, all right, thank you. That was it.
Thank
Chair,
you.
back to you.
Okay, yes, Bob.
Mr. Chair, and Kelly, I have another question. So we talk about in the overall master plan that there are underserved groups.
Yep.
And I look on the bottom of page 13, and there's something that talk about the engagement efforts for this group, building awareness and so forth. Pretty thin paragraph, but it's there, and I appreciate that. But I wonder what kinds of tangible things that you guys are thinking about in a broader basis to bring more of the underserved, perhaps youth, into the park systems or into the trail systems to give them exposure. And are we really committed to that? I mean, this is a nice plan. I really like it, but it's an asset plan.
That's exactly right, and that's how we approached it.
Yeah.
When we do at Three Rivers our master plans, many of them are intended to provide guidance for 10, 20, even 25 years.
Right.
And we think about the topic you're bringing forward really from an operations and a programming aspect, and we need to be a lot more nimble and responsive and monitoring and changing on the fly. So those are conversations that we are having, and they are not adequately represented in here because, again, this is a long-term plan, and those are things that are constantly changing. So I can speak to and share some of the stuff Three Rivers is doing, and it's a little bit outlined in here. But we have really ramped up our program. We have a community engagement team at Three Rivers, and they're now dedicated to doing a lot more bike programming. They have a bike fleet, teaching people how to bike, teaching people how to use the regional trail system, how the signage works. We have a trail etiquette campaign that we've been doing for several years. We've used a local artist who's made a bunch of signs that have very simple messages like keep your dog on a leash, stop ahead, announce when you're passing, and those are scattered throughout our regional trail system, and we're going to be changing that up in the next couple years again because signs get kind of stagnant and people stop paying attention. And just trying to better connect with those underserved community members and the groups that they're part of to really understand what the barriers are. And I think we still have work to do in understanding all of those. I think the biggest barrier for some of these is simply the magnitude in which the trails are used and loved and by who is using them. And you have some people on the trail corridors that are very experienced trail users, and they're using the trail system primarily as either a fitness or transportation piece. And some, not all, don't always appreciate sharing then with a caregiver who has young children who don't yet know how to ride a bike. they're looking to get from A to B in a pretty efficient fashion. And coming upon people that are walking dogs or have small children does create conflicts. And I think it's gonna get worse before it gets better. And so those are things that we are trying to kind of understand, like where exactly is this happening and what's the best way to encourage people just to be kind. I mean, I think it's the same as like when you're in your car or you're at the bus stop. There's just kind of a loss of compassion, civility. And our trails are subject to that same.
No, I think you're spot on with that. And yet I think, as I've said to some of you, I've been involved with Outward Bound for a long time. And part of our effort is to get more minority kids and people into the wilderness, getting used to being and comfortable with things that are outside the urban kind of construct. And when we kind of put this 2040 plan together, we said, hey, let's have this discussion at the master plan level before it's too late for us to do anything. Because here's an opportunity to say, gee whiz, your asset base makes a lot of sense. And we also understand the fact that, you know, the soft side of this thing is going to be fluctuating much more so than this. Nonetheless, I think it's important for us to stress from our committee point that getting underserved people into the system, despite the fact that it's going to irritate some of the heavy-duty users, is an important element of what we're all about.
Yep.
And I just think about, you know, getting kids perhaps to have a short race between A and B or something like that on these trail systems, or somehow getting them out into this to say, wow, that was really kind of fun.
Yeah. You know, one of the things we have found is access matters. And in about 1999, 2000, Three Rivers put together a plan. It was not a Met Council adopted plan, but it was how do you bring the regional trail system essentially to the first tier communities so that they can use trails to connect to parks. So we have spent the last 20 years building over 40 miles, Jonathan, of regional trails in the first tier, easily over 40 miles in the first tier communities so that people had that asset close to where they lived, and then they could use that asset to actually access the regional parks and park reserves within the system. So we now have that foundation in place, and those are not the trails necessarily that are in this plan. Those are different trails that we've already brought master plans and constructed them to the council over the last 20 years. And I think one thing that's exciting is 20 years is a long period of time, but it's not when you're thinking about developing a brand new regional trail system, and all of those trails, with the exception of like a few blocks here or there, are complete or will be complete in the next like 3 or 4 years.
Good.
And they go through every single one of the first tier communities, and they're touching exactly where the community members that we want to serve better live.
Thank you.
So I think that's step one, is having that infrastructure in place, and then the step two is how do you kind of create your campaigns to build awareness, to make people feel really welcomed, and make sure they have the skills and the equipment accessible to them so they can enjoy them like everyone else.
I will close by saying, I think there's room on this plan, or future plans, for a little more robustness in the comments about how important this is. And that even though it's not outlined in specificity like the cost of acquisition, that we're darn well committed to the project, and you know, we will measure our progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Should keep an eye on our time. We probably want to get through to a motion shortly here, if anyone's open to that.
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion for staff recommendations from the business item. Is there a second? Oh, that's from Bob, by the way. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second from Monica, thank you. Discussion on that motion.
No, but I just want to say that I use Three Rivers District all the time, and it's great. And I use it with little kids in certain spaces, and I know where should I don't go because, the bikers are too fast for us, so we moved to the side. And I think it's a great job that they're doing. And I see improvements every time. I think I mentioned last meeting, the Mississippi Gateway. It gets a lot of traffic when you're crossing, but people is learning, bikers, we're gonna pass you, and they have the little bells, which you can really hear because it's the water, but it's still, you move to the side. And then, the little kids, you can see them in the strollers on the line, so I think it's getting better. And I can't wait to see the canopy walk over there. It's gonna be great. So thank you very much.
Okay, further discussion? Like one thing I'll mention is hopefully we can make progress just with user awareness things, but with forecasted increased use and stuff too, we may need to keep an eye on trying to keep track of if there's places where we need to make facility adjustments just for capacity purposes for these user conflicts, of whether it needs to be a dual tracked thing for bikers versus walkers in certain areas or something like that. That might be a future amendment, depending on how that goes. Further discussion? Jeremy?
Would that be something we want to look at for the policy plan then, when that's reviewed again? Is considering those things in advance, or considering documenting strategic planning for programming in the master plan process?
Possibly.
That might be something we could talk about in 10 years or whenever.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah. Okay. Anything further?
Is there a way to actively think about funding that? I mean, maybe that's, because I think the issue of the conflicts, I don't know, I just think it's actually interesting. Like, matter of fact, the trail system that goes around along Shoreline Drive, and it's particularly ugly because cyclists love it for training. Like, it's not, like, that's not gonna change, right? And the idea of how do we, I mean, it's how do we actually accommodate the most vulnerable user? Like, I think that it's almost embarrassing that we're gonna throw our hands in the air and say it's gonna get worse before it gets better. And it is gonna get worse before it's gonna get better, because the person who is at greatest risk of actually being hurt is gonna walk away. Right? That's what happens. You accommodate the fact. That's what she just said. That actually is the only reason I said anything. Is because she just said that what I will do to keep my children safe, I know where not to go. So we have a system that actually does that. I mean, we just have to know that's the reality of it. So I do think, what is it we do to do that? And Shoreline Drive is a great example, because we can take up some road and and if you're riding over 15 miles an hour, you're not on the trail system. And really, honestly, that's what happens, right? If you hang out there, many cyclists will be accommodating and riding the road along Shoreline Drive, stay off the trail system, let it be available. All the homes that are over there, that's an area where there's high, right, use around strollers and walkers. And anyway, I think that as we say that, because the system, and I respect you saying it honestly. I mean, like you said it straight up for us. We don't mince words. We don't have to be confused about it.
Yep.
That we just need to actively support you in doing what you know is best. And I don't know how to do that right now.
And I think if we knew the solution, we would already be doing it.
It's separate trail systems. We know the solutions, and we're willing to do it. I think you do know the solution. That's all I'm saying. I think that that really a shared trail system that's 12 feet wide with strollers and walkers and cyclists that's new cyclists going 8 to 14, cyclists that are training going 15 to, you know what I mean? We know the numbers. We don't even have to, we know what they are. And I just think that we probably do, but it's really hard. And because there's land involved, it's gonna be really hard to do, right?
Land and capital investment.
That's right.
It doesn't, it has to be separate, but it doesn't have to be separate all around. Because I'm not gonna walk 25 miles with a stroller,
Right.
but there are parts of, like they're saying, right? Parts that should be,
And and they know where they are too, because they do study the system. I mean, you guys are our trail champions, so.
Kind of reminds, I'm sorry.
Just go ahead, Sue.
I'm having trouble getting back to this real person thing
You're
too.
forgiven.
It kind of reminds me of if you're going from here to Wilmer on Highway 12, there are the passing lanes where it's a two-lane highway except for those passing lane areas. Or if you're going from here to Hayward, Wisconsin, you have those too, so.
Sure, yeah, certain areas
Yeah.
periodically. I realized that I forgot to state the motion when it was made, so I'm gonna do that. And that is that the Metropolitan Council, one, approve Three Rivers Park District's Lake Independence Regional Trail Master Plan. Two, approve Three Rivers Park District's Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail Master Plan. Three, approve Three Rivers Park District's Minnesota River Bluffs LRT Regional Trail Master Plan. 4, approve Three Rivers Park District's Cedar Lake LRT Regional Trail Master Plan. 5, approve Three River Park District North Cedar Lake Regional Trail Master Plan. 6, advise Three Rivers Park District to implement advisory comments for Lake Independence Regional Trail and Cedar Lake LRT Regional Trail Master Plans. And 7, require Three Rivers Park District prior to initiating any construction of new or updating of existing paths, trails, bridges, or any other construction project to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager. I just have to do that. You were gonna say something, maybe?
Chair and Commissioners, I was just going to note that I love the idea of passing lanes on our regional trails, but I also think this is a topic, like, I think our system is in areas getting congested, and this is something that we can talk about when we update the policy, the Regional Parks Policy Plan as part of the Metropolitan Development Guide. So this is something that I think would be a good conversation to bring us all together.
Okay.
So put that down.
Further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of the motion for the proposed action from the staff report, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that is approved, thank you. Also, since I don't have any idea what the cameras show and don't show, I will mention for Sandy's purpose, people in attendance, we have Monica, Todd, Cecily, Anthony, Bob, Jeremy, myself, Sue, and Emmett, in addition to our various presenters. Should have done that at the beginning. So that brings us to our second business item, which is a Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant for Lake Marion Greenway Regional Trail in Dakota County, and we have Jessica Lee presenting.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners, and Council Member. I'm Jessica Lee, Senior Park Planner. My first business item tonight is the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund for Lake Marion Greenway Regional Trail, Adelman property in Dakota County. Lake Marion Greenway Regional Trail is located in the west central part of Dakota County and will eventually travel 20 miles through Burnsville, Lakeville, and Farmington. When completed, the regional trail will link the Minnesota River and the Minnesota River Greenway to Murphy-Henry Park Reserve, Ritter Farm Park, Lake Marion, downtown Lakeville, and downtown Farmington, where it will connect with the North Creek Greenway. This map shows the 4 planned regional trail segments. The Adelman property is located in segment 4 along South Creek, which is a designated trout stream and a main tributary of the Vermilion River. The Adelman property is 5 acres of undeveloped land featuring woodlands, grasslands, shoreline, and South Creek floodplain and uplands. Because of the high natural resource quality of this property, it will be funded with Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. The property was appraised at $116,000, and the landowner has agreed to a purchase price of $99,000. The total acquisition cost is $108,000, and Dakota County will provide the 25% local match. After this acquisition, about $8 million will remain in the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund account. The middle image here shows the Adelman property as Outlet B. This trail corridor will be part of a larger 42-acre conservation area that the county is purchasing. The county park conservation area will also include Outlet C and D shown on this map. So a rationale for recommendation is that this acquisition is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, the Lake Marion Greenway Regional Trail Master Plan, and Dakota County is within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the ENRTF Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund. Our recommendation today is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $81,328 to Dakota County to acquire the 5.06 acre Adelman property located at 4755 220th Street West, Farmington, for Lake Marion Greenway Regional Trail, and to authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the Council. And with that, I'm happy to take questions, and I also want to thank Al Singer from Dakota County for being here to help with questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I just want to say the obvious. Why does he want to get less money than the appraiser?
Chair and commissioners, that's a negotiation that happens, and they do offer the full appraised value. And so the landowner was willing to donate part of the value.
Okay. So is there a way that we recognize, the donation from it somehow?
I think the IRS does.
Well, yeah. I suppose, yeah.
Al,
Just to
would you
be,
like to?
thank you.
Sure. Al Singer, Land Conservation Manager with the county, and oftentimes landowners are faced with capital gains as a sale, and so if they reduce the purchase price, it essentially acts as a charitable contribution, so it offsets their capital gains. And so there can be some additional financial advantages to the family by donating part of your value of the property.
Well, maybe there's something. Thank you.
I'll move approval of the staff action.
We have a motion for the proposed action from staff report. Is there a second for that?
I second that. No.
I saw Cecily's hand first. Well,
That was
second by
Jeremy
Cecily.
making the motion.
Jeremy made the motion, Cecily second, yes. And that is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $81,328 to Dakota County to acquire the 5.06 acre Adelman property located at 4755 220th Street West, Farmington, for the Lake Marion Greenway Regional Trail, and authorize the Community Development Director to execute the restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. Other questions and discussion? I just wanted to verify, since this is part of their farm, is this already a separated parcel, or are we still waiting on a subdivision to go through?
Mr. Chair, members, this gets into very challenging negotiations between the city of Farmington and the family. Originally, when this started, we were talking about an administrative subdivision of the parcel. However, because of some additional questions, we had to go through the entire planning process. One of the issues was because this is within the MUSA, an adjacent parcel was already under development. They were thinking that they may need a bridge crossing of the Vermilion River. So when you perhaps noticed on the map that there was Outlot B, what we had to do is separate out Outlot D for the future of a potential river crossing, because the gravel road immediately to the south is going to be a new county road, and county roads restrict access. So all of that internal circulation that would happen within these new developments would not be able to exit onto 220th. So the short answer is property has already been platted. There are existing outlots, so no subdivision is necessary.
Okay, so there was stuff to go through, but that's already done.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Anthony?
So for the Lake Marion Greenway master plan, is the most recent actual version of that master plan from the early teens, or is it?
I think it is 2012 or 2013, something.
Yes, 2013. Has, as you're working on that, one that seems like a lifetime ago. So, you know what I mean? Is there something? I'm just wondering what kind of stuff you all discovered around that, because I know that the early conversation that was like a lot about connectivity and transportation, and we had so much of a transportation orientation like when that was happening, and so I wonder, have you all changed that at all and gone towards especially around the kind of outdoors progression programmatic stuff, because there's a lot of pretty cool stuff down there too, especially around fishing. You're really proud of water, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know if that's a question or not, maybe, but you know what, or maybe it is. Have you all thought about that master plan as a foundation, and how are you thinking in the light of the last 10 years of what we're planning to do with our system?
Mr. Chair and Commission, that's a really good question, because 2012 was sort of at the tail end of the recession, and this was really, residential development had paused at that period of time. We're now seeing it going gangbusters. And so amazingly, this corridor that was outlined in the master plan is still intact. We try to match natural resources, and in this case, we're following South Creek, and so part of that is already going to be zoned for protection anyway, so we were able to sort of take advantage of that. I think what we're really encountering is how do we work with developers as they move forward with projects so that it can be compatible. What we've tried to do is say, if the development has to provide stormwater management, put those stormwater management basins next to the corridor. So it actually becomes an enhancement for the recreational user as opposed to an isolated stormwater pond that has no rhyme or reason with the corridor. The other piece of it is also to be able to have natural linkages, local linkages that are compatible with the Greenway plan as well. And different cities approach these things differently. The city of Farmington is not nearly as robust or careful as the city of Lakeville, and so we have to work with cities differently in order to make sure that these visions are realized. So we are constantly reviewing those master plans. The master plans never identify a particular location for the trail alignment. There's sort of a general area, and then we're trying to be opportunistic so that we can work voluntarily with landowners and with developers. That's the process that we use.
You know, just kind of in light of the last conversation too, is there anything, you know, in terms of the new developers, the only time to put pressure on a developer is before there's a hole in the ground, you know what I mean? And so is there also something, you know, especially for you, because you're right, actually, between Lakeville and Farmington, like there's like, you got a world of difference too, Burnsville, Lakeville, Farmington. Is there any, you know, I think it's too, but is this an example of kind of what we were talking maybe a meeting ago about this idea of how we get this baked into the development, right? You know what I mean? Before the form is baked, that we're pushing hard, leveraging for that in terms of how we get wider trail system, we get more easement, you know, we get whatever that takes, and then the municipal pressure between those relationships, right? So that Farmington isn't that different than Burnsville, or Burnsville isn't that, whoever is.
I think part of this comes down to comp planning for the individual cities so that those corridors are identified within the comp plans going forward, so the developers and the landowners know going forward this land is going to be set aside. Gets into the whole idea about park dedication and who's buying what and all of those sorts of things. In our perspective, protecting the corridor one way or another is really, really important to keep our options open. And so that's why we work really incredibly closely with each of those communities to identify these corridors so that we can preserve. And then when development happens, then we're in a front row seat to be able to do this. We're also finding that if we can be proactive, if it's part of a parcel that's going to be developed, sometimes the developer at no cost to us will actually grade the corridor. So we don't have to come in and mobilize equipment, and it actually reduces our overall cost. So we can try to integrate these corridors into the overall development, and sort of over my career, it's really gone night and day where developers were saying, oh, we'll set aside this little back corner for natural resources or recreation. Now this is a marketing tool because they recognize this is what people want, and those property values adjacent to those corridors they can get more money for. And so it's really flipped. So we have developers coming to us to say, could we move the corridor into our development because they see that it's a real marketing advantage.
Any further discussion? Todd?
A question and a comment. Will we see you again on this Lake Marion Greenway in the future?
Oh, I suspect you will.
Yeah, because we're only right now we're dealing with 5.06.
F30.
And the other comment that I wanted to say, I know that Dakota County has been very forward thinking on their greenways. I had the privilege to be part of the Memorial Greenway that's still ongoing, but in those discussions with Jeff and some of the other staff, it's you guys have laid out a great focus on greenways and trails. So.
Well, thank you for those comments. We're actually appraising the parcel next to it right now. And then we're also appraising the parcel south of that because it could protect a future corridor for the corridor along the Greenway. That isn't even master planned yet, but because development is happening so fast, we're trying to reserve those corridors, and it becomes challenging because the council isn't going to fund conservation areas, and the state isn't funding greenways. And so that's why we have to separate these parcels into two different components to make sure that they're eligible for the right funding sources. So we end up with two values or sometimes two appraisals for that very purpose. That's what you see with that map with the conservation, park conservation area. The area on the east is reserved for the future Vermilion River Greenway, even though it's not master planned yet. But I have to keep that out of the habitat acquisition that I'm using outdoor heritage funding for. So we have to do this kind of stuff in advance.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Okay, hearing none, those in favor of the motion for the proposed action, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes, thank you. That will bring us on to our third business item of the day, a park acquisition opportunity fund grant for Lake Billsby Regional Park, also in Dakota County, and also with Jessica Lee presenting. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and Council Member. Again, for the record, I'm Jessica Lee, Senior Parks Planner, and my second business item tonight is a park acquisition opportunity fund for Lake Billsby Regional Park, Ferguson parcel in Dakota County. Lake Billsby Regional Park is located on the very southern edge of Dakota County in Randolph Township. Lake Billsby is a 1,300-acre reservoir of the Cannon River and the largest recreational lake in the southern Twin Cities metro area. The regional park is split into a 360-acre western unit that is located on the northwest side of Lake Billsby along the Cannon River, and a 250-acre eastern unit on the northeast side of the lake adjacent to the Lake Billsby Dam and connected to the Goodhue County Park by a pedestrian bridge. The eastern unit of the park has been developed for recreation, while the western unit is largely undeveloped and contains former ag fields, wooded areas, river floodplain, restored prairie, and mudflats delta. The Ferguson property is in the western unit. The 10-acre Ferguson property is undeveloped and features woodlands, wetlands, and grasslands, making it a great candidate for the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. This map shows the 10-acre inholding in yellow adjacent to existing Lake Billsby Regional Park land in green. The purple area is other land owned by Ferguson. The property was appraised at $153,000 and the seller has agreed to that amount. The total acquisition cost is $160,000 and Dakota County will provide the 25% match. Our rationale for recommendation is that this acquisition is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, the Lake Billsby Regional Park Master Plan, and Dakota County is within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the NRTF Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund. So our recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $120,229 to Dakota County to acquire the 10.2-acre Ferguson property located in Randolph Township for Lake Billsby Regional Park, and to authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the Council. Again, thank you, and Al and I are happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. What questions do we have? Or motions to make?
I'll move approval of the action.
We have a motion by Jeremy for the proposed action from the staff report. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Todd Kemrick.
Thank you, Todd. Second by Todd. That is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $120,229 to Dakota County to acquire the 10.2-acre Ferguson property located in Randolph Township for Lake Billsby Regional Park, and authorize the Community Development Director to execute the restrictive covenant on behalf of the Council. Any discussion on that motion? Sue, yes.
Thank
you, Mr. Chair. I was going to save this for the comments at the end of the meeting, but I want to do it while you're here, Al. I was at an event with an organization called the National Park Trust in DC a couple weeks ago. And at the event, I got involved in a conversation with a couple from the East Coast who had been in Minnesota for some sort of a family event, and they had gone to the Spring Lake Park Reserve for this event. And they were just awestruck by the experience they had. They went early and made a point of hiking and really getting to enjoy the area. And they started asking me lots of questions about how is it that the Twin Cities is blessed with all this. And I talked about the commitment that Dakota County has made. I talked about the MPOSC, and then I talked about the cities and owners of property who do what they can to pass the property forward. And they wondered aloud whether there's another place in the United States that has that kind of a cohesive, collaborative effort. So I just want to thank you. It's a thank you to the whole region, but definitely to Dakota County, because you folks really have done a great job. And I brag about the Spring Lake Park Reserve, even though I live in Ramsey County. I brag about it like it's my own, but they just were really, really struck. And I told them they need to come back and check out the bison, so.
Well, thank you again, and you know, this system rests on the shoulders of so many people, and forward-thinking people, and committed citizens, and committed partners, and public support, and elected officials. It really takes all of us to be able to do that, but it also takes really good planning, and it takes individual efforts. And so I think the park system is really a result of all of that great planning and vision and commitment. And you know, I happen to believe that the Twin Cities is going to be a climate change destination for refugees, for people that don't want to keep dealing with fires and earthquakes and sea level rising. And when people have a choice to move or where they want to stay, even our winters are getting much more mild right now, so that deterrent is sort of being lessened. But I think we're creating the green infrastructure that's going to allow that to take place. So thank you.
Welcome, thank you both. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brings us on to the information items of our agenda. First up, we have the 2021 Regional Park System Annual Use Estimate, presented by Darcy.
Good afternoon, Chair, Council members, Commissioners. It's great to be back with you again. I haven't met some of you in person before. It's a delight to see your faces, and I haven't been before you in a long time, partly because we have no 2020 use estimate. It was canceled due to the pandemic, so it's nice to be back. So, and one of the reasons that Emmett put a little more time on the agenda for the use estimate is because this is, for many of us, the first time getting a chance to go over it. And for those of you who were familiar with it, it's been a while, so we're going to kind of walk through a little bit what it is and what it's used for before we get to the data. So the use estimate has been produced annually since 1995, with the exception of 2020. And it's a huge effort done mostly by staff and implementing agencies, which I'm going to talk about here in a moment. And it's very important because it is used in formulas to calculate implementing agency shares of regional parks and trail system grant program dollars, and also for, and particularly for O&M funding. It also allows us to monitor trends over time. I'm going to tease right here that we see the beginning of a trend of a real uptick in trail use. I think it's a nice continuation of some of the conversations you just had and talking about Three Rivers proposal. But it allows us to monitor those trends over time. And it's one of two ongoing research responsibilities that we have here at the Council. One is the use estimate, where we count a sample of people. We count a sample without talking to them and then expand that sample to create an annual estimate. So we have that happens every year. And then we have a visitor study, which is a survey where we actually talk to people to see what they think and what their experience is. And I'm going to be coming back and talking to you quite a bit over the next few months about some of the results from that visitor study. But so we can remember the use estimate, we're just counting folks from a distance, the visitor study. We actually go up and talk to them. So the 2021 annual use estimate includes data from 128 regional parks, trails, park reserves, and special recreation features. In short, every unit that is in the system is included in the use estimate. We have a change this year, which I'm going to go into in a bit, that one of the ways that we calculate this estimate is we do a sample counts and then we apply multipliers. So for every car, how many people is in that car? If we know how many estimated visits there are in the summer, how do we calculate fall and winter and spring visitation? We do that with a multiplier by asking people how often they visit the parks. So we did the visitor study in 2021, the survey where we talked to people, and those multipliers are being used for the first time here. And I'll be going into that in a little more depth when I come back and see you next time. And then I think it's important to note that our annual estimated visitation is something that is published, it's covered in media, we publish it online, but as you know, estimated visitation is only one way to really see the value of the regional park system, and there's other demonstrations of value of climate mitigation, which you also just talked about, public health benefits. There's lots of other ways we can talk about value in addition to visitation. So here's where we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into how we calculate the annual use estimate. So this is really a true collaboration of interagency work, interagency collaboration, and also council staff collaboration. So early in the year, in February and March, we work with our implementing agency partners to work with the ongoing list that we have of all of the units and all of the possible entrances in the units. And I work with my colleague, data scientist Liz Roten, to create a schedule that is used with the updated, so the implementing agency staff update the entrances to all of the parks and trails every year. I work with my colleague to create a sample of 16 counts that are going to happen for each park and trail in the summer. And we send that out to the implementing agencies and they schedule these counts. And so at these 16 counts, and you start multiplying in your head, 16 counts in the summer at every park and trail, we're talking about over 2,000 counts where implementing agencies schedule a 2-hour count time where their staff member stays at that entrance and counts every person, bike, sometimes vehicle if there's parking areas, horses, boats, rollers. If you enter there, you're counted. And so it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort. And the schedule is set up, those 16 counts are randomized times, so we make sure we get the first half of the summer and the second half of the summer, that we get high use entrances and low use entrances. And then we get weekend and weekday. And so these are all, we make sure that the schedule has all of those randomized times. We come up with those 16 counts for each unit. We then bring in the previous 3 years. So we actually have 64 counts because we bring in the previous 3 years. Why do we do that? Think about some of the things you saw last summer with the days that it was too smoky to go into the parks, or days where there was a heat advisory, or when there's a thunderstorm. We don't want the use estimate to be inaccurate because a scheduled count is off because of an unexpected condition. Also, construction will close an entrance. So all of those, we bring in samples from 4 years. So then we have our 64 sample counts, and then we do what is called expansion. That's that middle square. So we expand so every count is actually representing all of the possible time slots that are similar to that one. All of the possible entrances that are similar to that one. So we go from that sample number of counts to a summer estimate using that process. And then we add in a few more things. We take the special events and camping, which again, implementing agencies are responsible for monitoring family reunions and company picnics and churches that meet outdoors on Sunday. Any kind of special event is added in, and also their camping numbers for the year. So they submit those. And then finally, we will expand from the summer count to an estimate of the winter, fall, and spring count. So all of that is added together. Yeah, I think I've covered all of that. there. And so we come up with our annual visitation. And our annual visitation this year was 64.9 million. And it's the highest visitation on record. I will say that the new multipliers that we're going to talk about next time, there were some decreases in the number of people per car. And so I'm not sure I'll be able to come back to you next year and say it's also the highest visitation on record. We have seen some changes and we'll talk about that. But our visitation is at 64.9 million. One thing I do want to, so here's the trend I teased earlier, is that all of this increase is due to increased trail visitation. Park visitation actually decreased 2.6% between 2019 and 2021. Trail visitation was up 11%. So there are always fluctuations at individual units and at different implementing agencies. So we really need to look over a period of time, but I think that that's an interesting thing for us to be monitoring. I also wanted to share with you the effects of COVID-19. So I mentioned on the last slide that park visitation decreased. Part of that was that special events, as you can imagine, were decimated by the pandemic. That special events decreased by over 1 million visits, over 30%. So that people didn't hold their family reunions, people didn't hold all of those outdoor events. We also saw, as a result of COVID, I believe, that I told you that new multiplier per vehicle has gone down a little bit. You think about what was the public health advice last summer, it was to not ride in cars with other people. And so we had seen a trend over time of people coming to the parks in fewer numbers together. There were fewer people per vehicle, but the pandemic definitely made a hit on that as well. Okay, so on the next slide, you can see our 2021 visits by implementing agency. And it ranges, so these numbers are presented in the thousands. So so the city of Bloomington had 830,000 visitors, estimated visits. And Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board came with the largest number of estimated visits at 24.2 million. I did have a little bit of additional information I wanted to share with you that in terms of what we saw of the change between 2019 and 2021 for some of these individual agencies. Again, there can be changes from one year to the next that are just due to sampling. We really need to look at trends over time. But we did see that the city of Bloomington had a 20% decrease in estimated use. And this was due partly to changes in vehicle multiplier, but also just a decreased number in counted visits in between 2019 and 2021. Anoka and Washington County had a smaller than a 5% decrease, a very small proportion, and MPRB, St. Paul, City of St. Paul, and Ramsey County had less than a 5% increase in the other direction. Three Rivers Park District, Scott County, Dakota, and Carver counties had growth rates of 6 to 14%. And again, some annual variation occurs among agencies, but these are things to stay interested in watching over time. Here we have a list of the most visited units in the regional system. Chain of Lakes Regional Park again came out as the top visited park in the system, and again Como Regional Park Zoo and Conservatory came in at number 2. Central Mississippi Riverfront Regional Park, Mississippi Gorge Regional Park, Minnetonka Regional Park. I need to mention Central Mississippi is Minneapolis and St. Paul combined. Minnetonka Parkway, Nokomis Hiawatha, Highland Bush Anderson, again is a partnership, and all of those are totaled there. Elm Creek Park Reserve, and then Phelan Regional Park at 1.1 million visits. So, and as I end, I do want to give my appreciation. I forgot to say this. My intern colleague Sabrina Nguyen helped put this together as a graphic designer and made it look really beautiful. So I do want to say how much I appreciated her work. She did a great job. And that's all. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, Jeremy.
Thanks. Do you do any density adjusted estimates? And we were talking about congestion before, and it made me think, is there within the report on visitor use an assessment of visitors per acre, visitors per mile on trails, or some sort of normalization for quantity of trail or park land within the implementing agencies?
Chair, Councilman, Commissioner, that's a great question. No, that is not a current part of the work. It would be interesting to do visitation per acre.
Yeah,
Sure.
I was thinking the same thing. It'd be interesting to see those numbers of, take just at the agency level, split it by park and trail, and then for trails, divide that by number of miles open to the public, and park ones, number of acres open to the public.
Particularly with Bloomington, that's what made me think of it, because of their relatively small area that they have. I wonder if we would see their balance of park versus trail is what affected their visitor use decline. That just was something I was thinking about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I agree.
Cecily?
Well, Darcy, I always look forward to this every year. I find it fascinating how the use of Minnesota regional parks and trails. But just a couple questions, and I know this is a ton of work, but because Minnesota has 4 seasons or 3 seasons or whatever we have now, highway construction and blizzards or whatever it is, I know in Washington County, and maybe it's due to COVID, maybe it's due to active people living in the county, there's tons of trail use in the winter. Your skiers, your hikers, your snowshoers. I think it would be interesting to know regionally what the trail use is. You know, again, they're clubs, they're hiking clubs, they're the high school cross-country ski teams, and a lot of them are on trails, not just in parks. Maybe it's also parks and trails. So I would find that interesting if it's possible. And also, you know, thinking of the trends, I was talking to some family members over the long weekend. And, you know, we all joked when the pandemic started and we were hearing that all the REIs and stores were selling out of everything. You know, skis and kayaks and the RVs were, you know, just sales were off the charts. Well, now they're all for sale now. So it'll be interesting to see if we get back to the same kinds of use or people have really changed their lifestyles.
Commissioner.
You know, so many people still working at home, maybe they are able to recreate more during the day. I don't know, just an observation.
Yeah.
That's a good, I'd like to know how many people return to being couch potatoes.
Right.
Just for our own mental sake and physical well-being towards that fact. We had to go outside.
Right.
I mean, you can only binge watch TV for so long and then you feel like you're growing mushrooms on top of your head.
Is that what those were?
If I may, I have a question first. You see the percentage of people, visitors and users, increase. If the increase is, the same percentage that you will project to think, okay, in 2022 is gonna be like, again, I don't remember what you say it was, like 1% or 5%. Has that changed, like a spike down, or is it too much, or?
Yeah, Commissioner, I appreciate that question. I do think it's really important to continue monitoring that we do see changes that mean that you can't just say, well, because there's a 2.5% decrease, it's going to continue, or that we really do want to look from year to year to see. I do think that we all will be interested in the trail if the increase in trail usage continues. There is, if I can speak outside of this presentation just a little bit, I do give credit to our colleague Jonathan, who did a trails or parks and trails kind of future use trends and talked about perhaps with the with the change in the pandemic that there might be decreased use as you mentioned. I also there is some new my data science colleagues have created a data set with some streetlight observations that I have sort of messed around with a little bit, and we that there's a lot more can be done. Any of you could go and find and download these data, but seeing that there actually is a decrease in the number of vehicles in cars between 2019. It's not just a kind of a fluke of the sample. It's not across the board, it's not every unit, but we do see some of those decreases. So
I would be interested in kind of checking our work periodically in that we have, in our parks policy plan, there's some statements of, we anticipate usage to grow to whatever. And in each of our master plans that we've approved, it's like we have anticipated usage of blah. And when we do both this and the visitor study, I'd be interested in hearing, are those matching up? Is it more or less than we guessed before? Estimated, but, you know. Are we on track, or is it wildly different from our projections, or any of that kind of stuff? And also, to Cecily's point, I'd really like to see at some point a full count in the winter and find out whether we're actually estimating that correctly. And also, how much does it vary by what's offered by a facility? And I have to assume that a place that has snowmaking and ski rental and ski classes
It's less
is
packed.
probably gonna have more winter visits than somewhere that doesn't have any of that.
Right.
So I think I've said that 2 years ago in your last presentation of maybe using the same off-season multiplier across the board probably doesn't make sense, but we don't have data on that yet, and it'd be nice if we did. Anyone else? Yes, Anthony?
You know, additionally, just in terms of how we're making investments, because I think that one of the things that is happening, and this probably sounds weird coming from me, is that we're over-investing in skiing. I mean, like Nordic is, I mean, when we, you know, it'd be really at some point when we think about that, and at the same time, you know, Three Rivers, we love you for all you do. We might find out exactly the opposite thing though, and I say that because I think, you know, right now we've got, you know, we've got Battle Creek coming online in St. Paul. We're making investments there, trying to learn from that. In Ramsey County, you know, we're cheap, you know, I guess. You know, I think it might be instructive and interesting for us to actually know what the return on those investments is in terms of, you know, a per person kind of investment, right? I don't think we really, and I think, and actually Cecily was interesting, I think, is that, you know, it's really funny, is all the people who love parks, we use words like a lot of, all the time, you know, and that just means all the people I saw, right? You know, we really don't know, and it's kind of, you know, all the people who bike because you bike, everybody bikes, well, nobody bikes, I can just promise you that, when we really look at the numbers. So I just think that with the depth that you're drilling into this, it can be instructive to also do this other aspect around return on investment in terms of attracting new park goers. Is there something where we do that infrastructure development, but to your point, it is the increased investment in equipment. You know, is there something we learned from, you know, again, from what's happening at Highland in terms of even the quality of the investment in equipment? Is it beginner's equipment? Is it in instruction? Do we invest? So because the other thing we know from our work around equity, the cost of instruction is magic, and the cost of instruction is absolutely prohibitive. It is absolutely prohibitive, right? So I think, you know, there's just something there around that kind of, you know, that analysis, and the analysis you're doing is amazing. There's just now us correlating with other things that we're doing that give us guidance. You know, they will give us some guidance, and that would be helpful.
There's some really subtle stuff in there too that might be hard to measure. So even you try to figure out how to do this. Like for me personally, I am skiing, but I'm skiing with my dogs. So that means that on most of the ski trails that say, you know, no dogs, no walkers, I'm not going to those. I'm going to the places that have the multi-use trails that also allow like fat biking and things like that. And we do get some of that feedback in master planning processes for individual units. They ask, you know, what do you want to see here for activities and so forth. But it'd be really interesting to get feedback then after those things are built of, are people gravitating towards the particular types of features they said they were or not? And how do you know, if you have a park that has multi-use trails and ski-only trails and paved and plowed trails, knowing which one they used is in the realm of visitor study rather than counts, but how much of that can we get, especially for winter, because there's just so futzy little details of that kind of stuff that I don't think we know.
Well, the reason I want to ask that is because we all know life change and it keeps changing all the time. But I can see that the park user is decreasing because why do I want to spend, gas is really expensive, so I don't want to drive to a park and do what there. So if you don't tell me what you offer, I probably won't go. I mean, I know Three Rivers Park, so I know where I'm gonna go if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. So, and the other thing is like, as a family child care provider, I can tell you parents have no idea what to do with their kids. So if you don't tell them what they can do, they will not go out of their comfort zone to try new things. So it's something like I would like to see if there is a way to figure it out. I mean, obviously Minneapolis has tons of things to do. That would be a really used trail or park. And Como Zoo, well, there's a zoo there, so obviously those have a lot of people. But I know Minnehaha has a lot of things to do too, and not too many people knows about it. So maybe, I don't know, make a marketing campaign so you can advertise families to do things in our parks, please. Go ahead, spend money on it. Or, I don't know, it's like a study, or people don't go to work anymore, so that might be another reason. They don't need to go out that much, so they can just stay at home. It's just, I like the parks. I enjoy knowing, but I don't know if I will go really to just because I want to go to a park and sit down and what I'm doing in the park here. I mean, Dakota County is far from me, so what am I supposed to do there? So if you tell me, that might be something to think about it. And it goes back to, you know, how to bring youth into parks, but what they can do. I see they get bored with electronics nowadays. They want to go out, they want to do things, but they don't know what to do because we never teach them how to do it. So I think this is a great opportunity, and it's a great information. I see that change in golf. Golf was declining, COVID hit, everybody went to the golf course, and the golf courses are still packed now. So it's hard to still get a tea time because you know now what you're doing there. So if you know, you tell me where I can go and get my dog tire while she pull me skiing, I'll do that. I love to get that dog tire or things like that. So that's probably something that we should look in the either policies or the master plans or something, just to inform more what we have. Great information though.
Okay. Any questions, comments? All right, thank you, Darcy. We'll hear from you again next month.
Yes, thank you.
Our next information item is the annual Metropolitan Regional Parks operation and maintenance allocation finalization. You heard numbers last month, we're getting updated ones. Heather Giesel.
Hello, I Chair Russo, Commissioner. I am here, I think this will be a quick item, just to give you updates on the final distribution amounts for this year's O&M or the 2023 O&M allocation. So coming off of Darcy's presentation, we have the final numbers now that that visitor study is complete. Here on the screen, you'll see on the left-hand side the preliminary numbers that I brought to you back in June, and the final numbers on the right. So you'll see that the reported expenses column remains the same. The only thing that changed were the individual distribution amounts among the different implementing agencies. The total dollar amount, of course, remained the same at 9.99 million. So every entity had some impact. None of them were, in my mind, significant. So it's kind of evenly distributed across the board. I can stay here or I can just go to the next slides.
Go ahead.
So on this, you can see the calculations. This is the preliminary calculation. The column that you're going to see change is the visits percentage, the fifth column over. So here's the preliminary numbers that you saw back in June, and there are the final numbers. So these numbers, these updated numbers are the ones that will go to the full council on July 13th. So they will see the final distribution amounts there.
Okay. Questions? Guess not. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That brings brings us to reports. I guess I'll come back to what Bob brought up, just mentioned. Yeah, there are some things that it would be nice if we could still do remote meeting hybrid stuff. There are technically some ways of doing that, but they involve types of technology and restrictions that council staff have in the past told us that they're not ready for. So that could maybe change, but I don't really see a likelihood of that. More likely would be if legislation can change some of those requirements, because like actually everything that we're looking at refers to a like interactive television. The legislation doesn't acknowledge the existence of the internet because it predates it. So they're trying to maybe update that, because of course everybody went and did remote things under the emergency orders, and then people realized, hey, maybe it'd be nice if we could still. So there were several bills introduced, a couple of them passed, but not the one that we need. Part of that is because the Met Council itself is a little bit funky in the language, in that we are not even a state agency, we're a state corporation, which makes it excluded from one paragraph that would be nice. So we'll see whether that gets introduced again next session. Maybe we can get something that allows hybrid meetings, but at least for the next 7 months, we're stuck with, we're in person because of open meeting law restrictions. But you make an excellent point, we hear it, just a certain amount that we can not really do because of laws.
Thank you for the update.
Yeah. I think that's all I have. Any other commissioners have reports? Jeremy?
Yeah, I missed last month, so I wanted to share that we did have a LCCMR bill pass, one of the very few that made it through this last session. And given the unlikelihood of a special session, the renewal of the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund constitutional amendment will have to wait until after the election occurs. And so next session, it will be of primary importance for any people that like natural resources to let their newly elected or re-elected representatives and senators know how important it is that ENRTF be reauthorized, put again to the ballot, so that we can continue to have those funding sources we've come to rely on for conservation purposes. So I am particularly interested in that as a person who's also on LCCMR, but I know that we rely on that here at MPOSC and the Met Council for our Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund. The other hiccup was that there was some language that prevented the inclusion of acquisition in funding. And I don't know if that's gonna stick around, but that was kind of a weird thing where acquisition is kind of on hold, at least through LCCMR. I'm not sure if that was also for outdoor heritage, but it was a weird thing that occurred while it's just on hold, I think, right now for this year, but yeah, I'm not sure if that's going back. So be on the lookout, constitutional amendment next year. Be prepared to mobilize and contact your representatives to ensure that that funding stays.
All right, thank you.
Be sure to bring that back up again.
I will bring it up as often as I remember.
Yeah. Anyone else? Cecily?
Yeah, a couple things happening in Washington County. Washington County has started their Middle St. Croix Valley Regional Trail Master Plan. And unfortunately, I missed the last meeting, but we're supposed to have a meeting this month. And this is a trail, the part of which is already in place, starting in Afton, going up to Stillwater, and there's a desire to have it go up to the St. Croix boom site, and I think there's even funding. So that will bring it, up the river from Stillwater, and hopefully someday up the river to the rest of the county. And another kind of exciting thing, we have a community foundation that serves Washington, Chisago counties, but also Polk, Burnett, and Pierce County on the other side of the St. Croix River. And they are setting up an environmental fund, which means grants can be given to organizations, nonprofits, public agencies who are interested in conservation, while the guidelines aren't written, I know they're very interested in serving cities and counties. So Washington County would be eligible. They will really need about $500,000 before they can start getting grants though, so they're not quite there, but it's still pretty exciting.
Oh, very cool. All right, so, anyone else? All right, anything by you, Sue? Okay, Emmett, staff reports?
Two very important ones. First, our Visitation tour is scheduled and it is on track to go for Friday, July 29th. I think we've canceled it 3 times and rescheduled due to the pandemic. We're gonna do it this time, so I hope the commissioners can come. We're really hopeful that there will be a lot of agency staff and Metropolitan Council staff on hand. Sue will be there. So
July 29th.
July 29th. We're gonna send all the details out for how this will occur. Again, it's Friday, July 29th. The first stop is gonna be Fort Snelling State Park. This will require all of you to have a park sticker on your vehicle, or you have to pay the $7 daily use fee, or you can buy is it $25? I don't know, they might have increased it.
I don't know, that might break the bank.
However, you can ask for reimbursement from us, and we would be happy to pay for.
And disabled veterans get a permit for free.
Yeah, so Todd's in.
And what time do we need to be at Fort Snelling that morning?
I just looked at the email. I think that they want us to arrive between 8 and 8:15. It will begin promptly at 8:30.
In the morning?
In the morning. Right in front of the visitor center, so the Thomas Savage Visitor Center right there. Okay, more details will be sent to you really in the next week. My other thing, and this is just what Jeremy and Tony were talking about, I don't know how we're gonna do it because we are actually being projected on our YouTube channel, but I would like to do tours this late summer and fall.
Cool.
Take people with you.
I like that.
It's not too late, let's do it.
We can do it. So if you have good ideas for where to go, we talked about Cleary Lake, we talked about Wargo, which is Rice Creek Chain of Lakes. Not the Chain of Lakes, but the Rice Creek Chain of Lakes, maybe Tamarack. I'm gonna look into all 3 of those options. If you have other ideas for places that you wanna visit, the Ravine Landing, okay?
Let's not do 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Ravine Landing was just rebuilt, so there's probably, that facility.
That's
might
very
have
nice.
It's
New stuff
amazing,
that.
yeah.
There's some new technology.
So when we last did tours, I'm trying to remember who hosted us.
I have a list, I've been keeping a list.
None of us remember, but he has a list.
We did Keller.
Because
Wasn't it Scott
we were
County?
in Snail Lake and over
Yeah.
in that
Yeah,
area.
It was from Keller, I think. We were
Yes.
at the golf course clubhouse.
We did Dakota County, we did
We also did
Dakota
the
County.
Whitetail Park down there.
Whitetail Woods.
Yeah.
So
Spring Lake
Anoka
Park
might be
Reserve.
up.
Go visit the bison?
Yeah, I wanna
they might.
definitely get to the bison.
Yeah,